sleeps, pal.
Hey there, this is Pete Townsend from Norio Ventures, and this is the first episode of Season 2 of Money Never Sleeps, or episode 32 if you're counting. Money Never Sleeps is a podcast that looks inside the head of entrepreneurs and at what makes them do what they do. Money Never Sleeps is kindly sponsored by Top Tier Recruitment, a specialist recruitment consultancy in fintech and financial services based in Dublin, Ireland. In this episode, we talked to Rich Corbett, founder of thestartup.com. Owen and I both met Rich recently in Dublin as he's working on a few new ideas to help the startup community and those that engage with the startup community in Ireland. Given how much time Owen and I spent with startups in 2018, it makes complete sense to start the first episode of 2019 with someone like Rich. Also, Rich is originally from Massachusetts like me and a fan of the New England Patriots, so go Pats! With that, on with the show. Here we go again. Welcome to Money Never Sleeps. We're here in the WeWork Dublin Landings offices and the offices of our sponsor, Top Tier Recruitment. I'm Pete Townsend.
And I'm Owen Fitzgerald.
And we're here with Rich Corbett, founder of thestartup.com. Welcome to the show, Rich.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Pleasure to have you here, Rich. So, Rich, we all met last month through a mutual friend. Maybe start by giving us a backstory as to how you ended up here, as it's a unique one. I think we've heard it, but it'd be good to share it with our listeners.
Sure. So I'm a Boston man originally, and met a beautiful Irish girl from Clontarf back in Boston around the turn of the century. And after 15 years in Boston, she persuaded me to come back here for a 2-year stint, and here I am 5.5 years later.
How did she persuade you? What was the thing that did it?
Oh, we would come back twice a year, and between the love of the Irish golf courses and an occasional pint, it was a nice pace of life. And having 5 children, we thought it would be a nice opportunity to get back to her family, and it's a great environment to raise kids.
Okay. And from a career perspective, you've shared that with me in terms of the places you've been and the types of firms you work for, but now you're doing something quite interesting.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I started my career in investment banking at Bear Stearns, and then I went into a San Francisco boutique bank called Hambrecht & Quist, which brought a lot of neat companies public like Apple and Amgen, that sort of thing. I migrated from there into venture capital for EMC Corporation, which has a large presence here in Ireland. And upon moving here, I've managed and run a IPO-centric hedge fund, Palm Street Capital, since 2002. So I would be very active in the U.S. stock market, and the focus of that would be as companies go from private to public to look at those opportunities, and there's an information gap there when a company comes public. As an investment bank, if they're part of the deal, cannot comment about that company for 30 days. So our model's always been that if you did the research, we could hopefully come up with evaluations and some metrics before Wall Street published on it, and that would be our advantage. So that's what we've been doing for a long time. And then I've always had an interest, through that background of trying to find good companies early. And I guess over the years, I find myself coming further and further downstream and looking at companies earlier in their life cycle. So I've been involved with quite a few companies in the U.S. from an angel perspective. I was the founder of a company called yoga.com with my wife when she was doing her MBA, and we were selling yoga mats and yoga blocks and that sort of thing. I've been involved with a lot of interesting companies from that perspective. And one of the arrows I guess I had in my quiver was a company called thestartup.com, which we always kind of thought about what would be a good fit for it, what's a good business angle. And about 2 years ago, I met somebody that was here for the Web Summit. I think that was the last year the Web Summit was here. And he had a great idea, and I said, I really like that. What's the name of the company? He said, it's called Ideasphere. I said, well, geez, it's a nice business model, but I'm not keen on the name. He says, well, do you have a better one? I said, well, it just so happens I own thestartup.com. So we did a deal, and we have opened a Dublin office.
Yeah.
And we've put a nice team together, and we're having a lot of fun and getting a lot of traction.
And what does the startup.com look to do?
So the startup.com looks to help startup companies get to their next best action. And for some people that might be, hey, don't leave your day job. Keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
For other people, it might be, geez, you need a little more education, a little more knowledge about this before you dive in. For other people, it would be to help them find funding, which sometimes I'll do personally and put money into companies. Sometimes it's using our network. We're exploring a few other options as well to help in that vein. And we feel like we can help companies. There's a very vibrant startup scene here in Ireland, but I think it can get a little bit confusing sometimes. And hopefully we can give a little bit of clarity to that to folks and help them navigate that. And we're finding some nice companies, and we're assembling a nice portfolio of companies in the meantime.
So it's about putting a bit of structure, I suppose, around people's ideas and the path that they're going through.
Absolutely. We've built a software platform called the Ecosystem, which is essentially a dashboard that helps an entrepreneur get about to the things that we feel they should be doing on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly basis. So we kind of keep them to a rigor to say this is what we think is the next action that needs to be achieved to get to the next milestone. And we kind of track that, and we help push them along to keep along that timeline.
Okay. Interesting journey. And you mentioned a few minutes ago going downstream from IPO, right? And I think that's pretty cool. And just let's look at that for a second. My own experience in terms of helping startups has been just that. It's a natural helpfulness that's there, right? And I went directly to where my sweet spot is, which is in fintech, primarily in capital markets and some other deep tech areas. And you're approaching it from the perspective of all that time with Hambrecht and Quist, right? Where you were on the IPO side, and then with the IPO focused hedge funds, going then deeper, as you said. What was that first trigger to go deeper beyond, okay, here's some companies that are about to go public, but then getting, what was it in your head that got you to that point?
Well, I was at Hambrecht and Quist, and we brought a company public called E-Trade.
Yeah.
And it was kind of at that point when I would call a client and say, geez, this is a good company, I think we ought to invest. And I would generate a commission for that, and I would get paid a percentage of that. And E-Trade came out and said, geez, we're going to bring that commission from $300 down to $30.
Right.
And I said, the little light bulb went off. I said, guy, you're in the wrong business here.
Yeah.
So I left there and I went into the venture capital world.
Yeah.
And it was corporate venture. So at that time, it was in vogue to have a corporate VC sponsor. But we were investing in some great companies, and I was sitting down with companies, Walmarts and Toys R Us and Time Warner said, we want to build a website, or we want to get into this thing called broadband.
Yeah.
And this big empty pipe. And you said, it was a little hard to get your head around it back then, but now you look at what's going on, and, you saw what was going on there. So at that point, I basically said, and I started seeing a lot of opportunities come across. We had a network with all the major venture capital firms in the States. So they started showing me ideas. And I said, geez, this one really has, a tiger by the tail here. So I would start putting a little bit of my own money into these things. And I think that's what led me to kind of say, okay, I can help these companies. I can point them in the right direction and get them to that next best action, which, a lot of times would be funding in the States. There's a tremendous amount of money there, and get access to that. And then when I came here, the same thing started happening where, some of my connections, both in the States and people that I met here, started showing me opportunities. And I was really struck at the valuation difference. The same company here that's raising money at a $1-2 million valuation, you could bring them over to Boston or New York or San Francisco, and you'd be talking $5 to $10 million valuations. So to me, it's, geez, I can get in good companies, good founders, really sharp folks at a deep, deep discount.
And what do you think is driving that difference in valuation? Lack of funding here, or different mindset than the US?
I think it's the mindset, to be honest with you. I mean, most of the startups that I would meet in the US or even in their decks would have this kind of grandiose unicorn vision. And, a lot of Irish guys that says, geez, if I could sell that company for $25 million and get that black Range Rover in the house, down in Docky or up in Howth and, maybe buy a pub. I mean, happy days. So as an investor, if I'm coming in at a $1 to $2 million valuation and they get to that $25 million, that's a great return. It's not a unicorn. I mean, Ireland's starting to get there. We're getting the first couple of companies that are getting near that. I would love to see a couple of companies get to that milestone here by staying here, by perhaps doing their IPO, in Ireland, in London, and kind of keeping it here versus, the typical model at this point was when you get to scale, it's, hey guys, you can keep the dev team here, but we need you to pack up and move over to San Francisco.
Yeah.
And that's a challenge, I suppose. Like we see with a lot of companies here, it's that trying to expand, because it seems like Ireland's a great place for building and testing out your ideas, but to really make a difference internationally, then you need to go to the bigger markets. And I suppose it's different in the US. You can have a company do fantastically well selling in the US, and I suppose it's a challenge. And the companies you're working with then, or that you've done some kind of personal investment in, how do you help them, or how do you work with them?
Well, I'll give you an example. We are involved with a company called Seed Golf, which is a guy down out of Carlow Institute of Technology, and he has reverse engineered a Titleist Pro V1 golf ball to some extent. There's guidelines as to what you can do with a golf ball, so they're all really kind of up against that line in terms of distance and compression. So we met Dean. We liked the idea straight away. It's a product that everybody loses golf balls. Some of us more than others. And his business model is that of a Dollar Shave Club, which I don't know how popular that is here. But it's essentially the same quality product, but it's half the price. Anybody would go and buy razor blades, and you finally track down that person with the key, and they let you in there, and then you go to the counter and you realize what you're paying. So,
yeah, I know. For our American listeners, to buy 4 Gillette razor blades here, the latest ones, it's €20.
It's crazy.
Which is ridiculous.
So Dean is doing the same thing with golf balls. A dozen Pro V1s here would be about €50. He sells them online direct to the consumer for $25. So he's had a tremendous amount of success. We've helped him raise $250,000. I put a little bit of my own money in there. We have done corporate partnerships with Bank of Ireland, with Aer Lingus, a host of companies. We've got a really interesting marketing angle to this whole thing. He's very good on the marketing front. We're launching the ball in the U.S. Next week at the PGA of America Golf Show down in Florida. And we've introducing a line of clothing, hats, golf gloves. We've got a golf glove called the Full Irish.
Okay, good.
Which is an all-weather golf glove, actually made in white. Most golf gloves are black for some reason, but we've made this white. But Dean has a lot of traction. Monthly sales hit new records every month. And I think the next best action for him is get him into the U.S., which is 60% of the golf market. Continue on with this, building that brand, with the thought of we don't have the money to pay a guy $1 million to wear our logo on a golf shirt. So how do you go about that? And we're using social media. We're using a lot of influencers. We're getting some golf reviews, and it seems to be working.
Okay. How quickly do you kind of get to business model with the startups that you talk to? I mean, I meet a lot, and where it's very clear that they're solving a problem we're solving, but sometimes it's, can you convince enough people to give you a bag of money for the problem you're solving? Do you look at it from kind of a technical perspective in terms of your background in the markets and the types of things you looked at in the past that kind of you've got a real knowledge about, or are you looking at it from the perspective of how you're going to make money?
A little bit of both. I mean, obviously, we want to stay in areas that we feel we have an understanding of the industry and what's going on there. So we would know a fair bit about software as a service, cryptocurrencies, medical devices. Obviously, I've been involved with some e-commerce stuff along the years. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean we won't look outside of those areas. We just did a property tech play here that I'm excited about. I think they got a lot of potential. But one of the things we do is what we've built is an assessment tool on the front end of the startup.com website, where you can come in and without divulging your idea, you can take this 30-minute or so assessment which kind of delves a little bit into what is it that you're looking to achieve, what's your expertise there, how much do you know about that industry, what does the competition look like, and then it'll generate a score from 0 to 1,000, and then we will give you a free 40-page SWOT analysis. So what we're finding is people come to the site, they take the assessment, and it seems like our sweet spot seems to be around 550 to about 750. It is asking you questions, so you can be a little bit delusional, I guess, and, say, I'm the master of all domains and maybe score 1,000 on that, but we tend to find that those aren't realistic. And those people that kind of fall in that space, we typically will engage with and say, geez, you did pretty well in the score. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about what you're working on, or sit down and or send us, a little bit more information? And that is kind of our filter tool, because I think you could probably sit down and have meetings or coffees nonstop at this point, or at that stage that where we're involved, and it's kind of our filter tool to say, okay, let's take the 25 ideas or pitches or decks that might come across my deck in a week, and narrow it down to the 2 or 3 that we should sit down with and learn a little bit more.
Okay, all right, that works.
And I'm just thinking of it now because there was a lot of press coverage and Twitter coverage over the weekend around VC and the business model. The New York Times had a piece, I think it interviewed 50 startup CEOs, and they were talking about how VC doesn't fit and it doesn't work anymore, and a lot of them aren't looking for that money in the same way. But I suppose, how do you see the difference then with Irish companies? Because obviously typically people would go to VC to kind of supercharge their growth, or it'd be seen, especially in the US, that you're raising a lot of money to hit that unicorn level. And then how do you see that fitting then in an Irish point of view in terms of working as a fund, or ideas like that where you do multiple investments in Irish companies which may have a lower kind of path of where they're trying to get to, or what their focus is? They're only looking to get to the 10, 20 million, which isn't maybe not the typical kind of VC space. Yeah,
I mean, I do a fair bit out in San Francisco with kind of the top decile VCs. I'm active here. I work with Silicon Valley Bank, and Clive Lennox, who's the man on the ground here in Dublin, does a great job. But we're involved with some of these top decile VC funds out there, and the amount of money that they have is absolutely staggering. SoftBank has just come in with an enormous fund. So it's causing the next tiers, the Sequoias and the Kleiner Perkins, to also be raising these multi-billion-dollar funds. So the thought of them coming to Ireland and and stroking checks for $250,000, $500,000, a couple million, but it's just not what they want to do. So I think what we're looking at is the thought of putting together a fund to say, okay, if we were to give those guys an option to look at the best, half a dozen companies coming out of Ireland, would there be an appetite for that? And the feedback we've gotten has been pretty positive about that. But you do hear CEOs lament here about the lack of venture funding. Part of me says, listen, if it's a good idea, the money will find you. Yeah. So I don't think that's an excuse or a crutch to use. Obviously, there's huge incentives through EI and the government here with matching monies and their involvement. So there's plenty of opportunities to get access to funding. And the other thought is you can run some companies pretty lean and mean. Mm-hmm. You don't need a mahogany desk and ergodynamic chairs. Sometimes I find the best companies that I get involved with usually have the worst offices and the worst chairs. Yeah. But they're sitting down and they're getting the work done. So, our model is get the work done. We kind of keep you to a methodology. And, if we say we'd like this by Friday and we like this by next Friday, and those things don't get delivered, and it starts to become repetitive, then we kind of just, cut bait and say, okay, we're going to move on to, other things, because obviously our time is valuable.
And that's pre-investment, obviously.
Pre-investment. Post-investment's a little
it's good.
Might be a little
it's
more
a little
harsh.
bit hard to cut and run, right? Did you ever think about doing something different than what you're doing right now? I mean, you got a lot of things going on, but I can see it all fitting together neatly into Rich, right? And what you like to do. Is there ever another part of you that says, well, I should be doing something different, more focused perhaps, or?
At this point, I like the direction it's gone. It seems to have all worked out. My brother and I sometimes sit back and have a laugh about it. Things weren't, the easiest growing up. And I was kind of under the belief coming out of school that I needed to go somewhere I could make money.
Yeah.
And I was pretty focused on that, for better or for worse. And I started right out of college making $5 an hour as a cold caller. I was given 2 telephones, 2 stacks of lead cards, and I made 1,000 phone calls a day.
There you go.
And
I stuffed 1,000 envelopes a day.
Yeah.
Yeah, for about the same. But that was in high school rather than college.
Yeah.
So,
Well, this is, and I think that's a really lost art nowadays, is actually picking up the phone and calling people.
Big time. I've got one guy that I'm working with. Yeah. One guy I'm working with, and he's like, just stop emailing, stop sending Telegram messages, stop sending Skype messages or WhatsApp. Just call them.
And it works.
Yeah,
it works. If you pick up the phone and say, "Geez, can I come into your office and sit down with you 15 minutes?" Versus, "Hey, can I send you another text or can I send you another email?" Because, I'd rather take a look at you and have a conversation.
Have you noticed that context being different in Ireland versus in the U.S.? Because where was I? It was just the other day, just on Friday. One of the lawyers I'm working with needed to see me. I happened to be at Dogpatch Labs. Their office was just across the river. I popped over in 15 minutes, and that was great. And the more and more you do here, the more that happens, you get that FaceTime with people. When I was doing some work in London last year, there was an element of that I really found to be quite effective, where you could just jump over to somebody's office if you're in London for a few days. How do you find that being different here versus in other countries where you've lived?
I'd say it's more an age thing at this point, where people are more used to using technology, I guess.
Yeah.
Than I was. So, the thought to me, and I try and ingrain it into my kids, as they go out and try and get their careers going, is pick up the phone, stick your head in the office, because it does work, and people, that's how you create a bond, and it's tough to create a bond over an email.
Yeah.
Yeah. And coming back to your point before that around, I know the companies I'm looking at, especially when I'm talking to founders, I really like to have seen some sort of sales background or some sales experience, because I think it's invaluable, especially face to face. I know that I mentioned on a podcast before when I was the guest that some of the stuff when I've sold things online, I found I learned far more about myself by actually bringing something to someone's house or whatever to barter, than when I was working at Barclays and I was just selling their products, because people come to Barclays, they want the products, the price is irrelevant in some ways, but actually trying to sell your own stuff to people makes such a difference. And I see that with then the founders we work with. And coming back to what you were saying there about some of the roles you've had, and you, Pete, as well, like it's experience that not everyone has, but you're out there selling your product all the time.
Oh, big time.
Or you're selling yourself.
Yeah.
Whether you want to, go up and ask that girl for a dance or whatever, it's, always be selling.
I found being honest works so well, right? 2 on Friday, small sales, not even sales, they were raising money for something. And both were based on empathy. And I didn't even realize it at the time, but both things that I did on Friday that I closed were based on me expressing empathy. And it worked. And it wasn't duplicitous. It was just, hey, this is how I feel right now. How do you feel about this? Great, let's do it. Right?
And based then on the volume of stuff you've been looking at, I suppose, is there any other sort of traits that you would see from your experience working with startups that, maybe are more valuable to founders than others?
We just invested in a company that I met with, and I think it was on the second meeting, and I expressed a possible pivot to the business. I said, "Have you thought about this? It seems to work, and it's fascinating to me. It's an app that I would use often, a lot myself personally." They walked out of the meeting on Friday. They called me on Monday morning and said, "Look what we built over the weekend." And just the speed at which they gave me a wireframe of taking what I gave them as a concept and saying, "Look what we've done," really was what put me over the edge to say, I'll put money with these kind of guys, because these guys are hustling.
Yep.
And, a lot of people will get stuck to their business idea and say, "Geez, I've got this great solution." And the ability to kind of look at that and say, well, it might be good, but this could be great. So have we thought about this? Or would you look at this? And those people that are, flexible like that and can adapt a little bit, because obviously there's a lot of startups chasing a lot of ideas. The number of ideas I've got of, hey, we're going to get a company to deliver beer to my dorm room.
Yeah.
I've seen that one, almost on a weekly basis.
You should see who we have coming up next.
Nothing against getting that. But there needs to be a little bit more, finding the opportunity. Even, I've got some startups come in and they have this broad path of what they can do, and I said, listen, why don't we zero in on one aspect of that, get that right, get a couple of customers on fold, and then we can think about, expanding this over time.
Yeah, we had Helen Fullen on from the NDRC a few episodes ago, and her thing is to, as quickly as possible, get to go, no-go, or pivot, right? And whatever solution that founder has and whatever they're trying to work on from a business model perspective, just as quickly as you can, make sure that it's worth doing and it's worth getting.
And
there.
the same when Chris Adelbach from Techstars was here, he talked about actually, companies or founders being willing to listen to the feedback, because often you get companies coming in and they've, done this before in a corporate setting, or they think they're great and they have these board of advisors and they think they have all the answers and they won't listen then to the feedback. Whereas that example you just gave there's guys who took your feedback on board and instantly kind of did something with it.
And they got the money.
Yeah. What do you think in terms of, for you to be successful at doing this, Rich, what are some of the personality traits of yours that you can kind of think about to say, yes, this is why it's worked?
I think I've, back to that cold calling, analogy of 1,000 phone calls a day.
Yeah.
Just to say, listen, there's going to be, I'm going to get as much work done as I possibly can. I look at a lot of prospectuses for IPOs. I look at a lot of business plans, and I'll just tear through as many as I can to kind of, sift through the chaff, to get to the wheat. And I don't know.
Is that industriousness? Is it OCD?
No, I think it's more industrious. This, I'm pretty good at multitasking and kind of looking at a few things. And then, the whole key to the whole thing is you got to surround yourself with people smarter than you are and put a good team in place. And I've got Finn Murphy running the startup.com for me, Dylan O'Reilly. We've got a really sharp group of guys that are doing a great job, and they're a pleasure to work with. So I'm excited about where we're going, and I think Ireland is just such a great little micro environment to start a company. All the Fortune 500 companies are here. There's a great engineering influx that's starting to happen. There's the government subsidies. So get it right here, get it working here. Then you can go across ponds either way. Again, find that first key customer, listen to what they want, listen to what changes, they're recommending to you, and just go for it.
Yeah.
Great. Well, look, I know we've all talked before and we could continue talking for hours on end, no doubt. We like to wrap up with a final question, which is, what would people not expect to know about you? I don't know. Well, I was a basketball player in college, so that was my game. And then I fully immersed myself in the Irish culture, and I am now a member of the Benator men's hurling team.
Oh, really?
So I am out there with the hurl.
All right.
Giving it a go.
I think I'm becoming a GAA coach for my sins. My kids are involved in Stars of Erin and in Glencullen, so I'm going for it. I won't be out there with a hurl, though. That's what we like to see. We suck you in, you see. Absolutely.
That's it. Here I am, year 5 of my 2-year plan.
Good man. All right.
But listen, thanks very much, Rich, for being on the show.
Thanks, Rich.
Thanks for having me, guys. A pleasure.
Great. So that wraps things up for this episode, but don't go just yet. We'd like to thank Rich for opening up his mind for the 32nd episode of Money Never Sleeps, a podcast brought to you by Norio Ventures and Owen Fitzgerald and sponsored by Top Tier Recruitment. You can find out more about Rich by checking out thestartup.com. It's a great URL, isn't it? If you like what you heard today, please subscribe to Money Never Sleeps on iTunes and leave us a review. Each one helps. Or you can subscribe via our podcast website to other media channels like Spotify and Stitcher. So just go to the subscribe page on www.moneyneversleeps.ie and follow the links. If there's someone you'd like to see featured on an upcoming episode of Money Never Sleeps, drop us a line on info@moneyneversleeps.ie or get in touch on Twitter at Pete Townsend NV or at Owen Fitzgerald 9. Check out the show notes on moneyneversleeps.ie for more detail as well. Besides producing this podcast, Norio Ventures partners with fintech founders and established players in financial services to build new ventures and blaze new trails. and we do our best work when we're helping established players and startups simultaneously. Check us out on norioventures.com to learn more and get in touch. In short, we find economic reasons to be helpful. Finally, we'd like to thank Conan Brophy from Create Sound for recording and editing this podcast. Till next time, thanks for listening. See ya!